Thank you for having me. My name is Gagné, and I'm the founder and CEO of ENG. We specialize at helping organizations operationalize AI so that people and machine can actually collaborate better. As a quick background on our organization, we were founded almost 4 years ago. It's going to be 4 years in October. And the organization is born from previous collaboration between myself and Yoshua Bengio, Turing Award recipient and one of the godfather of deep learning. Our company now operates at scale with over 350 people across 6 locations. And in terms of service and product, we help organizations on the strategy, on implementation of product, and we do research and development and provide our own platform to the market. So one thing that we've learned and we think is really important for everyone to remember and understand is that AI, as fancy as the name is just software. It's a digital machine that we build to accomplish a specific task. For sure, AI is an acceleration of software. It's actually an evolution of it. It generates new capability and it can be tied together to accomplish really amazing things. But it takes a great deal of human input and engineering to make it work in the real world and especially at scale. So the approach that we take to develop the algorithm, collect data, to train them, design product around them, and deploy them in the world have a huge impact ultimately on the final outcome. AI technology is generating these new possibilities for software, which means that new ways of operating for organization are possible, but they also come with new risk. It is not an autonomous technology marching forward on its own accord. These are outcomes and risks that we can actually control. Ultimately, it's about hard work. Only a handful of organizations have figured out how to wield it effectively across their businesses. Not to mention spin up a solution quickly, which is part of why we didn't see AI taking a huge role in the pandemic. For the most part, a lot of the situation that the pandemic created were actually new. Of course, there are some examples of AI contributing and alleviating some of the problems of the pandemic or actually detecting it. A company out of Canada called Blue Dots managed to do an early prediction in 2019 of the virus starting to emerge. But that was the result of actually a lot of work that was done before in the prior years to build the detection algorithms. The system required a huge amount of data, a lot of human curation, and analysis to actually work and then get the value out of it. So when it gets to artificial intelligence, really there's 4 quadrants that we like to think of when it gets to organization personas. And it's important to understand kind of the trade-off between risk and impact. There's nothing wrong with being one or the other persona. It's just a different approach to digital transformation, and especially a different approach to using artificial intelligence. So I won't be getting into this into too much detail, but I think it's worth just covering some of the different persona here, get a high-level understanding of them, so maybe you can identify yourself and understand kind of the dynamic that you're living in right now. So the first one is the AI follower, and it's one of the most, where the most of the major companies are embodying today. AI follower are using AI software, such as an email client or ad targeting system, or employing data science and analytic platform, but in a very ad hoc manner. Typically, they don't have fleshed out governance or coordination around AI, and they may be surprised to discover what has happened in the AI space already. While the follower can yield some of the benefits of AI, it's a high-risk endeavor because of potential external threat of having AI not being considered. In particular, unless it's been planned ahead the time to adapt can be too long to effectively counter the use of AI by a competitor. Next is the AI consumer. For this persona, the company mostly consumes point solution of AI product and services. For instance, a bank adding a feature for a check deposit via a smartphone camera. In this case, risks are lower because AI usage is tightly controlled. It's well governed and the risks are pushed onto the vendors. Further, the scope of the project is limited and their impact reduced because of lack of coordination and leadership from across department, as well as culture of minimizing risk. A culture of governance and control makes it very difficult for these companies to accept the risk necessary to transition to a high-impact use of AI until often it's too late, meaning that they are complacent and unable to transition to AI innovator, so again, at risk of being impacted by AI-wielding competitors that are embracing this more fully. The AI innovator for us feels like the sweet spot. The AI innovator recognizes that AI is a significant source of strategic differentiation for the company. The company seeks to enable AI both top-down as well as across departments. The innovator also have a willingness to take calculated risk and to learn by doing. For the innovator persona, the time to develop a novel AI solution is low, minimizing the external threat of a competitor wielding them out of the market, and the governance culture at the company enables the effective balancing of risk and reward. What makes the AI innovator different from the other persona is that the innovator are especially interested in solving future ambitious opportunity with AI rather than existing low-risk opportunity. It's possible to reach this level today from follower, and a small number of companies have already reached it. It's much, much harder to reach this level from consumer, as it requires a 180-degree shift in risk culture, which normally necessitates a complete transition in senior leadership and a return to being an AI follower. The last persona is an AI exploiter. There are interesting nuances here, but I'll skip this for the sake of time, as you need to become an AI innovator and get there, and the rest of the presentation is focused on how to enable that. So when we look at overall adoption, regardless of whether they have chosen to be an AI consumer or an AI innovator path, most organizations right now are at early stage of maturity when it comes to making AI works. Earlier this year, our team found that 80% of organizations are still exploring and experimenting with AI, and we put together a report breaking this down by industry and show that these numbers hadn't moved much year over year. If we look at per industry picture, we found that industry with lots of quants and operation research, like banking and insurance, have some advantages in harnessing data and analytics, but there's still a long way to go to really get to a point where they've operationalized AI, and many have been struggling to even get started with the biggest gaps being in strategy, technology, and especially governance of AI across the board. Our clients are energized about this work, even during the pandemic era, because the imperative to build a smarter world, a digital world, is so much greater. So before COVID-19, really forward-thinking companies understood that working smarter with AI comes with enormous benefits. Now that everyone has to work smarter and then everyone has to really do the digital transition, this makes even more sense for smarter supply chain, smarter anticipation of unlikely event, planning of strategic planning for organization, etc. So with greater adoption of AI, I'm very interested to see what happens to the AI maturity trend by this time next year. And I think that companies everywhere are going to be waking up to the fact that AI is not just something that is nice to try to do a POC or a pilot on, but it's now a topic for the C-suite to figure out, and that a plan and a proper thorough investment is not required for the business to move forward in the future. So let's take a step back and look at why there's so many challenges in making AI work. So in theory, the process to build AI seems pretty straightforward and linear. You identify a business need, you plan, you build an experiment to apply AI, you deploy it, and then once the solution's proven into the real world, you can scale it with every step having a clear set of sub-activities. But in reality, the process is a bit more iterative, and it's actually pretty hard. Without the proper tool, the process is actually complex and it's time-consuming. The AI team ends up spending an enormous amount of time on technical challenges that they don't necessarily have the expertise to do. For instance, building tooling, doing a lot of non-AI work, cleaning data. Your AI talent will be spending about a third of their time on non-AI work and another third of their time cleaning data and doing data preparation, leaving only 1/3 of their time actually doing AI modeling or testing the capabilities in the real world, which slow down and make a lot of projects less profitable, less productive. So one company we spoke to estimated that up to 40% of their project were impacted by this situation. And then of course the talent is scarce, which makes it even more struggling. There are also challenges in terms of maintenance. The AI tooling ecosystem is quite fluid, and it's important to be able to integrate with new tools that are emerging in the market, have the right governance, have the right legal framework, etc. So there's lots of things that are still quite evolving fast that makes running these systems at scale still a challenge today. So as a result of business attempting to operationalize AI are all facing the same challenges. We've been really looking at this and trying to group that. And the first thing we've discovered was that most of the AI lab were quite siloed from the business units. So they operate, they learn things about the technology, but they don't necessarily understand the ecosystem in which they need to be deployed. The other situation that we've seen is that a lot of the AI solutions are actually one-offs. So they end up being quite custom systems, and therefore they don't benefit from being quickly updated. It's hard for vendors and AI providers to scale themselves, which makes a lot of these deployments and a lot of these solutions quite expensive. And then finally, there's a lack of visibility into how does AI creates value, and this is often because of lack of governance on a few fronts that limits the ability to assess and properly quantify how AI will be turning into a differentiating advantage for the business. So from there, we've been thinking about 3 key pillars that organization needs to have in place in order to be successful at deploying AI and scaling it. First one is to really have a state-of-the-art AI muscle, meaning that getting a good understanding of the tools, getting a good understanding of the models is extremely key. And because it's such a fast-evolving environment, making sure that you do have people who understand and can translate that into your business world is very key in making sure that you can plan the right way and that your plan actually resists the fast-paced evolution of the sector. Second is to foster more impactful collaboration between these innovation teams and the business units. Seems obvious, but often does not happen. Means that these people that are knowledgeable about AI needs to spend time with the business people, understanding how do they drive decision, what KPIs are they subject to, how does the business dynamic, the business model behaves as it evolves, and really be able to keep that in mind as they're looking at opportunity to apply and use the tools and apply the technology to the business problem. And that level of transparency will not only help in making sure that proper return on investment is constructed and measured, but also will speed up the process of identifying new innovative opportunity and routing them to the right business problem, the right use case, so that the business can take advantage of that. That it's probably one of the single most important thing to keep in mind as we want to enable AI in an organization, that collaboration spirit and in all the processes and the operations that goes around it. Finally, making sure that you can future-proof that investment, making sure that you have the right benchmarks and that your environment is in place so that you can test in a frequent way and that you can prevent a lot of the downside and risk that comes with using the technology, which is model drift, the incompleteness of the model understanding of the world, meaning that you're lacking the proper data example, and all sorts of situations like that can really come and hurt you down the road if you have not done the proper work and put in place the right infrastructure. So coming back to ENG platform, out of necessity, we've been facing these situations also ourselves, and we've been building different tools to help us actually mitigate and speed up some of these steps. So one of it comes in the form of our product called Toolkit, and then that system essentially enables to train and annotate and test model at a huge scale on very large amount of data, and then provide also an environment where we can come and annotate that data in an extraordinarily effective way. So the net is with the compute ecosystem we've created, every time that a new annotation is actually entered, the model is retrained and the entire data set is scored based on how much does the model don't know about certain part of that data set, and then essentially optimize step by step what our annotators or business people providing as new input to the model to make sure that we're maximizing the productivity of people who are working to train models. That whole system also comes with benchmarking and a lot of reports that really helps have the right governance in place and have a good understanding of how models behave, not just when we're building them for the first time, but also over time as new data and new business situations emerge, as the market shift, also understand how is that performance evolving and what are new kind of situation that should be annotated to maybe cover for things that we've not seen in the past that should now be taken into account to make sure that the model is robust, the model is complete, and that the performance is maintained. Other tools that we've been building, and this is more on the product front, but this is a great example of how you can create an experience where you have great collaboration between AI models and business people. So this one is actually a system that requires no data scientist intervention, and really collaborates with business people at extracting information and driving decision around documents. These documents can be form invoices, long form reports, texts, tables, etc. And essentially the goal is that a lot of the transactions that happens between organization or between business units in the same organization are still in the form of documents, and understanding the content of it and then driving fast decision making at the back is one of the very important step and tasks that most businesses have to work on. So the goal here is to have a collaborative approach where for the most part, a lot of these documents don't have 10,000 example to be able to train on. And it's impossible to build an ROI or make sense of this. So really here the product we've built is an approach where we're providing autocomplete, essentially recommendation. So we watch the user do his job, and then at some point we start making recommendation, and we reduce drastically the number of keystroke and the time per document, only relying on the user for the most uncertain piece of decision. And then as the confidence of the model goes up, naturally switch to automation if there's enough example, or stay in the recommendation mode if there's not enough example, but still provides a benefit. And this is really a way we see AI making its way in the enterprise, not just around making decision around documents, but also around lots of other tasks where aiming for full automation or thinking that AI will be autonomous is a bit far-fetched. But really enabling an amazing environment where there's collaboration between AI and humans is quite exciting. So with that said, I'll just hit again on the fact that AI is just software. It's a new way to program, meaning that we're programming using data, an example. But yes, it's just software, meaning let's change our architecture, let's get better, let's understand these new risks so that we can actually benefit from that new way of programming software. And we can turn these benefits into real world impact that ultimately are going to benefit all of us, because the market always does something really well, which means to eventually always pass on these benefits to their customers, to business customers, and ultimately to all of us. So let's take control of this. Let's get on this transition. It's a lot of work. It's very hard, but it's absolutely possible. So hopefully with this, I've made this a little bit more concrete, and we'll be happy to get in touch and help you out on your journey if you feel so. So thank you very much.